Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Andy, trade talk is heating up as December 15th rolls around, and as always, the Lakers are involved. Plus, a big award for LeBron James. We'll talk about that and much more on Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So all that and more, Andy, including I think the best sign low-key ever, that LeBron James is an incredibly rich and incredibly powerful man. So we'll get to all that coming up in the show. We do want to thank you for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. We get this thing up early for you. So no matter where you are, how you listen, when you listen, there's always a fresh podcast there for you. I want to let you know, too, that Tuesday's episode of Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Truebill. It's the new app that saves you money by helping you identify and stop paying for the subscriptions you don't want or need, and can even negotiate better deals on those you want to keep. So Shams over at The Athletic, Shams Charania, has a new column up that on Monday, I believe it was, where got the trade chatter out there on some big names. And of course, the Lakers are involved with that. So we'll get there in a second. But a little bit of housekeeping first, Andy. Trevor Ariza getting closer. He's going to practice with the G League, along with Kent Bazemore, who doesn't play anymore, and Rajon Rondo, who I think likes the exercise.
We want to make it clear, by the way, to people that Kent Bazemore was not demoted to the G League.
Just needs a little bit of run.
I don't think you can do that to Kent Bazemore due to his service time in the league. Without he has to give the go ahead to that demotion. And I think at that point he would say either trade or cut
just release me. Go ahead and release
exactly.
me at that point.
This is just to keep Kent in shape. And Rondo, I imagine his practice time with the G League team is similar to why I imagine it is with the Lakers, which is probably not doing a whole hell of a lot of anything.
It's whatever he wants to be doing on that particular day. I have to say, though, we'll get to LeBron here in a second, but like the prospect of being like a young G Leaguer and having access at practice to Rajon Rondo sounds awesome.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's a reason young players tend to love, like, no matter where he's gone, when he was in Dallas, when he was in Chicago, all these places where he didn't really work, so to speak, in terms of his overall fit with the squad and the organization. The young guys on those teams loved him, like swore by him, and then the same thing happened with the Lakers in his first go round. So
yeah, and he actually really seems to enjoy that part of it as well. So I imagine all those G League guys, they should not be shy or intimidated about going up to Rondo with questions and things like that, because he'll likely answer all of them, and you will benefit a lot from having gained that wisdom.
Yep. All right. So we spent a lot of Monday's episode talking about LeBron James, who was phenomenal against Oklahoma City on Friday. He was arguably even better against Orlando on Sunday. Triple doubles in both games, correct, Andy? I lose track, but and since the suspension in the 8 games he's played since popping Isaiah Stewart in the mouth, he's been really good. And statistically speaking, and the engagement level over his last couple games, particularly since that Clippers game, has been even better. So the numbers are good. The engagement is even better. And as a reward, Andy, he has been named the Western Conference Player of the Week, which must get him very excited. He shot 61% from the field, 42% from three-point range, averaged 28 points a game. The Lakers were 3-1 last week. He had 7.5 rebounds, 8 assists, almost 2 steals, almost 2 blocks. So do you think he notices when somebody awards him the Western Conference Player of the Week?
Well, before answering that question, just to let you know, for just accuracy's sake, he did not have 2 straight triple doubles. He's had 2 triple doubles in his last 3 games. He had a triple double.
I forgot which one was which.
Right, and then he had a triple double last night against or Sunday night, I should say, against the Magic. To answer the other part of your question, Brian, try to put yourself in LeBron James's headspace and imagine this is now your 65th Conference Player of the Week award. 65th. To put it in perspective, he has 46 of the months to go along with those now 65 of the weeks. To answer that question, I think he just donates whatever plaque. Like he just donates it to some type of charity.
At this point, like his mom's got to be, Gloria's got to be very tired of getting those "My son was Western Conference Player of the Week" bumper stickers to put on her car.
Yeah. I mean, she's probably got like a $600,000 ride that looks like some hippie van with all those bumper stickers all over it. She's torched the resale value.
Eventually, it's like, okay, fine, let it go. We know you're proud of your kid, but
It's like there's always that van that you see driving around that's got like a Carter 1980 bumper sticker, like one of those. I imagine that's how Gloria's van looks now. Except it's all just Eastern Western Conference
Player of the Week, Player of the Month, she's got one car for Player of the Month, one car for Player of the Week.
Mm-hmm. And then the car she actually drives.
You're right. And because
those stupid stickers all over.
The point isn't so much that LeBron James was Western Conference Player of the Week, because he doesn't care. The bigger thing here is that it is part of a. So we talked, Andy, a couple shows ago, and I know you made the point. Like everyone, from fans down to the players on the roster, because I think they were thinking in a lot of these ways too, had to stop kind of waiting for that moment where things just sort of fell into place, and all of a sudden it clicks, and the team is working right. And Anthony Davis was talking about, like, what we've got is nothing a 10-game winning streak won't solve. Like, stop that. It's when it starts to work, it's going to work, and it's going to look like we look up in a month and we're like, you know what? They're kind of playing well. Like almost like we did with Russell Westbrook, where we kind of looked up after 3 weeks and was like, wow, he's gotten a lot better. I feel like that's what we're looking at here.
I mean, you and I have talked about many times, Brian, how when we attended 81 in 2006, we both sort of looked up in the third quarter. It was like, oh my God, Kobe's already got like 55 points. Sometimes things just sneak up on you because the larger context changes what you're seeing. And in that particular case, what it felt like going into halftime wasn't that Kobe was on pace to maybe put up 50 or 60, because at that point, that was just something Kobe did. The actual story was like, oh my God, this team that is fighting to try to make sure they stay in the playoff hunt, they're about to crap the bed against a really bad Raptors team at Staples Center. Like, that's what the story felt like. Then once the game started getting more and more in hand, you realize, like, oh wow, Kobe could be on the verge of making history
80
here. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's not an apples to apples comparison, but just the idea that you're going to see the whole picture once it's there. And it's just too simple and neat and convenient to think that there's just going to be this aha moment for the season with this many moving parts and this many stops and starts that they've had. It's kind of impossible. All teams have to build towards something. Right. And I don't think the Lakers are any different.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There are a couple signs out there about how radically different this season is playing out relative to expectations, that I think is instructive for sort of along these lines about how we're eventually going to think about this season if, knock on wood, things go for the Lakers in the way that people hope that it might and still can. Plus, signs that LeBron James has tremendous FU money. We'll do all that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Truebill. Do you know why free trials renew without your consent? It's because it's a business scam out to get you. Don't let greedy corporations pocket your money. Download Truebill to take control of your subscriptions. Truebill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't want, need, or just forgot about. On average, people save up to $720 a year with Truebill. That is a lot of money. You could use that money. Companies make subscriptions hard to cancel, but Truebill makes it incredibly simple. Just link your accounts, and Truebill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. Truebill has saved over 2 million users $100 million combined. So don't fall individually. That would be incredible. Don't fall. Don't fall.
That person
It's a great
really,
service. It's not
at that
great.
point when you have $2 million worth of subscriptions that you need to have unwound, that is on you.
No, Brian, 100 million worth of subscriptions
for
2
million
is the amount
people,
of
right?
users.
Right.
Yeah, $100 million. It's more a you problem than the greedy corporations. But don't
LeBron could
fall
afford it. We'll talk about that next.
It's true. You won't miss it. Don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now. Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA could save you thousands a year. Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA.
Andy, it's funny. Like, we're getting towards Christmas. We just finished Hanukkah, all that kind of stuff. And, in the holiday season, there's always like the stereotype of like, oh, what's the worst gift you can give someone? It's, oh, great, I got socks. If I were to give you socks or joggers or a shirt or a hoodie from Stance, you'd be excited about that, because these are not boring old socks and underwear and apparel and all that kind of stuff you got to settle for. Stance changed the mindset by offering colors and comfort and creativity and designs and all this other stuff. And so, what are your favorites? Do you like collaborations in your socks? Because I know you've talked about that a lot. Like, I wish I had more socks that were collaborations. And you get Wu-Tang Clan, you got
You must
Batman.
be so sick of me saying that, Brian.
It's like another dinner party where you're talking about this.
Yeah.
Please, Andy.
Mhm.
People are tired of it. But the Goonies, Star Wars, The Office, Harry Potter, Disney, Marvel, Bob Marley. Those who feel good do good. So see for yourself. Register for an account at stance.com and get 15% off your first purchase. Use promo code Locked On at checkout to apply. Enjoy the color and comfort of a life less ordinary, Andy, with Stance. There is an interesting poll out. This one was done with ESPN, a straw poll of their
Tim
media
Bontemps
types.
was in charge of it. He does
Right.
it every year.
And so, if Tim's in charge of it, it's well executed. And then there are other ones at NBA and all that. People are sort of talking about early season MVP and where it might be and all that. And the point that we want to get into is not necessarily to argue about who's winning. In the ESPN straw poll, it's Steph Curry followed by Kevin Durant and Giannis. Okay, works for me. Steph Curry has been dynamite, and the Warriors are probably the best story in basketball. All good. What's interesting, though, about it is who isn't on this top 12 names on this straw poll. None of them play for the Los Angeles Lakers. Even down to Donovan Mitchell, tied for 12th, gets one vote for 5th. Like, there's nobody even getting a 3rd, 4th, 5th place vote. Not
Good
AD.
job, David Locke.
I know, not LeBron. Donovan Mitchell did wear that Locked On T-shirt. So,
got to pay him back, man.
And it's not to say that the big three and the Lakers deserve to be on a list like that, because I don't think any of them necessarily do. But it's another one of those like little signs that this season just isn't going to be or go or finish in the way that I think people had hoped. It doesn't mean it's going to be a disaster. They could still be the 4th team in the conference probably, but it's just a sign that we all have to recalibrate our expectations about this year.
Yeah, and to reiterate what you're saying, they're only currently a game and a half right now behind Memphis for a 4 seed. So it's pretty amazing. But even with all the issues they've had, they have lost very little ground thanks to a Western Conference that's plagued with teams dealing with all their own issues. But with this team performing up to its potential, even with the idea that LeBron and AD, and to whatever degree you think Russ could be in this conversation, would cancel each other out in different ways as far as the MVP race, it's very difficult to imagine the team living up to that level without them being represented at all.
Somewhere on that list, right?
Right. It would just be a situation where none of them are higher than 5th, but they make up 5 through 8, somewhere in that level, 5 through 9. They're represented somehow. You can't really make an argument for anybody considering the amount of games that LeBron's missed, and maybe he is right now on the way towards reinserting himself in that conversation, but he's missed a ton of games, and Anthony Davis has not been the type of player that I know you and I have been looking for, a lot of Laker fans have been looking for, and a lot of media have been looking for. It isn't that he isn't performing well, because he is playing well, but he has not taken his game to that next level in ways that you just feel with Steph, with
Yeah.
Giannis, with Jokic, with Durant, guys like that. I mean, hell, DeMar DeRozan with the Bulls before he was part of the team COVID. He's felt like he's put more of a stamp
Sixth
on
this
yeah,
straw poll.
yeah. He's felt like he's put much more of a stamp on his team's season than AD, even though I think most people would agree Anthony Davis is on balance a better player than DeMar DeRozan.
And it's funny, like, too, it's one of these things where, you know, in the last segment we talked about, like, if all goes well, we're going to look up in mid-January, the beginning of February, and be like, you know what? It hasn't been a straight line. It hasn't been totally linear, but, like, you know what? I feel better about this team. They're performing better. They feel they've got a couple good wins under their belt. Yeah, they lost that one over there. But you feel like they are in that conversation. And I think one of the signs of the Lakers, if this continues, two things happen. It means, first of all, the Lakers' record, because that's part of what goes into the MVP voting. It's like, you know, the Lakers are 2 games over 500. They haven't beaten anybody, you know, other than that Boston game, I guess. You know, they've been very disappointing from a record standpoint, from a statistical standpoint. And that's part of how you get your name into one of these things. You know, so for starters, you know, if you look up in, you know, whenever, you know, the end of the year, when the end of the year straw poll comes out and LeBron is 5th and Anthony Davis is 8th, and maybe somebody throws in Russell Westbrook at like 12th or 13th or whatever, that's a sign the Lakers are probably right back in contention.
Oh yeah.
Among the top teams in the West, and people think of them that way because it means the storyline is turned, and it means those 3 guys are playing at the level that puts them back on the radar, even if they're too far behind Steph, KD, Jan. No, but it doesn't matter if they win. It matters if they're part of the conversation.
In other words, Brian, it's nothing LeBron is losing sleep over.
Oh, I see what you did there. I just say that there are signs that the Lakers are getting better. Their point differential, all that stuff, is slowly improving. Over the last 10 games, they have a net rating of 5, Andy. That has not happened all year long, where I think we have a 10-game stretch where they are above water in net rating. They're 5th defensively. I like it. You mentioned LeBron James and sleep.
Expertly, I might say.
He noted after Sunday's win that the secret to his success is sleep. And he was not doing the calm.com read that we do on this thing that mentions LeBron's superpower is sleep. He was just talking. In doing that, somebody asked him, well, how much do you sleep?
I believe it was Dave McMenamin.
It was Dave McMenamin, yes, of ESPN. And LeBron said, well, for example, I went to bed, I think, you know, last night, whatever it was, at midnight, about 12 o'clock, woke up at about 8, got up, ate breakfast, took a 4-hour nap. Like, this to me, we talk about boats and yachts and, you know, buying stock in companies or owning things or whatever. If there was ever a sign that you had FU money to design your life in whatever way you think is appropriate, being able to sleep for 8 hours at night and then take a 4-hour nap after breakfast, to me, is the ultimate designation that you can control your life in any way that you want without consequence, or that, like, this is part of your gig. I was blown away. I haven't gotten 12 hours of sleep in a 72-hour period since my children were born.
It's amazing. It's, to be clear, I think, and this is something, if nothing else, we've all learned from watching Succession, I don't think the billionaire class is a sleeping class on a regular basis. And I don't think LeBron is somebody that regularly sleeps 12 hours a day. Like, that's just not how the rich and powerful and connected, I think, conduct their days. But it is, as you said, Brian, the ability to make it happen when you need to. And just the idea that you could carve out that much time to sleep speaks to, as you said, the FU money that is required in order to make it happen when it really is necessary. I'm just also incredibly amazed and frankly jealous of somebody who just can sleep that long. As somebody, you know this, I deal with bad insomnia. I have bad sleep patterns. You know, I get my sleep on top of it screwed up by a child and family and 2 dogs, like, just like everyone's
Meth problem.
Yeah, everyone, everyone, including my dealer, is messing with my sleep. And I also have anxieties. I think over issues that I'm going to go out on a limb and say LeBron does not need to worry about.
Right. I mean,
Um,
basically, here's the thing, Andy. If you tried to sleep, like you and I could both, if we really wanted to, if we were super determined, I could sleep 16 hours in a 24-hour period, or 12 or 14 hours. The
I don't
difference
even know if
is,
I could.
like, if you it's the without consequence part that strikes me as amazing. Because if I did that for like a week, I'd be well rested as I move all the stuff out of my house because I miss rent the following month. It's like I'm not getting my stuff
Or
done.
your
Like the
wife
kids
kicks you
aren't
out.
right. The kids aren't going to school. It's
Mhm.
like, but like
Yeah.
LeBron has an infrastructure, and you're right. A lot of billionaires don't spend their time sleeping, but if it's their business to be well rested and sleeping, and they can afford to, and they have people who take care of their stuff, and they have the help with their children, and and wealth and fame, they are able to do that. I was like, God damn, because when he's done playing, and this isn't like LeBron will still be able to sleep 16 hours, or 12 hours a day if he wants to in any 24-hour period. He will have that kind of money to sleep as much as he wants without consequence. I just found that amazing. All right, so it's trade season, Andy, and two big names are out there as potentially moving as soon as the 15th, when it's not an official moratorium, but basically most of the league becomes eligible to be traded. Um, the Lakers are involved, according to Shams Charania of The Athletic. We'll talk about it next.
Locked on Lakers brought to you by Boost Mobile. You listen to podcasts like this one for the power of knowledge, but you switch to Boost Mobile for the power of saving money. Because with Boost, you get the power of a free 5G phone so you can listen to all the latest episodes. The power of 3 unlimited data lines for $30 a month per line so your family can harness all that brain power too. And the power of one of America's largest 5G networks so you can do it all the speed of 5G. With all that money you'll save and all that knowledge you'll gain, just imagine how powerful you'll become. Get a free Samsung Galaxy A32 5G when you switch to one of America's largest 5G networks. More power to save, Boost Mobile. Reminder, free phone is limited to new customers and one per line. Additional restrictions may apply. Offers and coverage are not available everywhere for all phones and networks. See boostmobile.com for details.
Okay, so the two big names, Andy, that are out there that I think people are looking at for trade possibilities. I guess we're not going to talk about Kyrie because that's just way too complicated. But there's Ben Simmons, and there's of the Sixers, and there's Jerami Grant of the Pistons. Um, let's start with Grant, because Shams Charania is reporting that people are already contacting the Pistons. There's interest. The Pistons are open to the idea of trading Jerami Grant, who, by the way, has a thumb problem and won't be able to play for about 6 weeks, but is a good player, still pretty young, and would fit, I think, the profile of what the Lakers could use. Is a kind of a plug and play guy who can score a little bit, can stretch the floor a little bit, and can defend. Played a great role with some very good Nuggets teams that Lakers fans will remember. This gets back, though, to the same problem that we have in every one of these scenarios, where it's like, yeah, sure, the Lakers could use a guy like Jerami Grant. I'm sure they're very interested in Jerami Grant. How the hell do they get Jerami Grant?
It feels well. I actually think it's potentially doable if Detroit really likes Taylor Horton-Tucker. I think you can work out some type of deal where the Pistons get THT, Kendrick Nunn, and filler of sorts.
Right.
Melo finally ends up a Piston.
They have
19 years
a
after the
first
draft.
round pick in either 24 or 25, whichever
Exactly.
one the Hornets don't use, or the Pelicans don't use.
I think it is doable. Like, again, the Pistons would have to really want Taylor Horton-Tucker. Maybe you get a third team involved to get them a little more stuff, because once you get past THT and Kendrick Nunn, the Lakers have nothing but minimum deals, and they're not going to trade one of the big three to get Jerami Grant.
The veteran leadership of DeAndre Jordan.
Again, I would think that if this is something that's being talked about, the Lakers would largely just say, who do you want out of these guys? Like, really pick whoever you want. In certain respects, they're all kind of the same.
But like the point of what you said it a couple times, and that it gets to everything that with every trade scenario that the Lakers are going to be talked about. Like, like at least with Jerami Grant, you can come up with scenarios where the money kind of lines up and makes sense. But it all comes down to how much do teams like THT? Like, do they really is THT the thing that the Detroit Pistons want out of all the things that they could get for Jerami Grant, who would have a lot of appeal around the league, despite the fact he's going to get paid pretty soon, like really paid, could get an extension worth like 120 million bucks or whatever. And like basically every trade scenario comes down to, is the thing that another team wants Talen Horton-Tucker? And I don't know the answer to that question, but it's a very narrow lane to be operating in if you're the Lakers.
Look, this was something that we talked about very early on and very often ever since the Lakers constructed the roster the way they did. In a lot of respects, they're pot committed to what they have because they gave themselves so little flexibility to change anything. I mean, it is yet another reason beyond what he could have done on the court that it would have made, I think, much more sense to retain Alex Caruso, just because that contract would have given you more avenues towards making those type of changes, like a Jerami Grant type move. Without also, I mean, in the case of Jerami Grant, what I think also makes it tricky is you're picking up a guy that's dealing with this thumb issue. So you're not only disrupting your roster and disrupting however much you think has been built up this season, you're disrupting it, bringing him in, but you also have to wait to disrupt it.
The only thing it is, but you'll have to still wait even on the back end of this. But one thing that does make this a little bit interesting in terms of the aspect of it that you're talking about right there is the Lakers actually can't trade THT on the 15th of December. They have to wait until mid-January.
Yes.
So it were the Pistons. Not only the Pistons have to decide that they want to wait on trading Grant until as long, and they might, because the injury actually helps the Lakers probably in this regard, because it softens the market a little bit. Detroit might wait until he's closer to a return.
Plus, Detroit at 4-22 may already realize we want that number one pick. What do we need a useful player for?
Well, it's better to acquire that guy in February than acquire him in December.
They may want to find out how likely is it that THT will re-injure his thumb. If the answer is soon, then we're definitely
then we'll do it, right?
Yeah.
Would he be willing to injure his thumb as a condition of trading for him? But about a month's worth of Grant's recovery will have already happened before the Lakers could even do a thing like this. The other thing, and this legitimately, when I read it Monday morning, made me chortle, Andy. It was a good thing that I wasn't drinking something at the time because I would have spit on my computer when I saw the update on that the Lakers are part of the conversations around Ben Simmons. The mechanics of this are staggeringly complicated. Theoretically, it would involve Kendrick Nunn, THT, and then some sort of kabuki stuff where the Lakers acquire things from around the league, or the addition of Russell Westbrook into a trade. But what my favorite thing would be somehow if the Lakers acquire Ben Simmons without giving up Russell Westbrook, insert him into the starting lineup and just go YOLO on the concept of literally having no spacing. Because at that point, I would demand that they start DeAndre Jordan to go with this lineup.
Yeah.
So you have the floor spacer in that lineup is LeBron, and literally nobody else can go beyond 15 feet. I am here for that. Let's do that. Let's lean into it. I mean, and theoretically, Ben Simmons would help them defensively. But if Westbrook doesn't go in this trade, acquiring Ben Simmons is a very odd fit.
Yeah,
would you not agree?
Well, I'm thinking about this from Philadelphia's perspective. If they were interested in Westbrook, he's literally better than the nothing you're getting from Ben Simmons.
That is true.
He will help with Philadelphia's scoring issues in the playoffs, even acknowledging some of his own flaws that have come up in the postseason. He is much better as a scorer and way more willing as a scorer than Ben Simmons. As long as Embiid is on the floor, their defensive baseline is really good by definition. Westbrook could find Green and Curry open for a lot of threes. Westbrook is also, too, the only non-clutch client among the Lakers' big three, and Ben Simmons is a clutch client.
That was my next. Andy, are we even having this conversation Are we even is Shams, however tangentially or however thin that thread might be, linking the Lakers to Ben Simmons if he is not a clutch client?
Well, I mean,
Really.
there are some, Brian, and by some I mean me, that suspect that the Lakers, in choosing financially between Taylor Horton-Tucker and Alex Caruso, were, shall we say, swayed by the clutch influence. Because on paper, at least, if you are looking to try to maximize LeBron's window for a championship, him now being in his 19th season, even though he has the ability to win Western Conference Player of the Week awards just, whenever he feels like it.
Pretty much.
Alex Caruso is much readier to help right now than Taylor Horton-Tucker. And it is, again, easy for some, and again, by some, I mean me, to imagine the front office being told something along the lines of, if you want to keep both, that would be awesome. We are, from the outside looking in, big fans of Alex Caruso.
Sure.
If you're going to keep only one of them, we just would like to remind you that Taylor Horton-Tucker loves Los Angeles.
Right. Would you
do with this information whatever you want?
Would you say, Andy, that at this point the Lakers are in the clutches of Rich Paul?
That's so terrible, but I love it.
Yeah. Well, okay. We'll end on this. Scale of 1 to 10. If you had to grade the LeBron for Ben Simmons, if you had to grade the likelihood on a 1 to 10 scale, or we'll go 0 to 10 of Jerami Grant becoming a Laker this season, what number would you assign?
3.
I think that's too high, but that's in the ballpark, I would say. Okay.
From 1.
If you had to assign a number value 0 to 10 of Ben Simmons becoming a Laker before the end of the season, what number value would you give?
-11.
I think that's too high.
I'm rounding up.
I think you're still too high. But this to me was like, oh my God, we will do the clutch thing with everything at this point. That was my reaction.
I guess you also could give Rob Pelinka some credit for maybe being proactive and trying to figure out, okay, how can we get involved in facilitating?
That's different.
The trade.
That they could be involved somehow is different than the Lakers are interested in acquiring Ben Simmons.
Yeah, I mean, it may start out that way. They may be interested in it, realize there's no way of making it happen, but then also realize, hey, maybe there's something we can get out of moving the guy that our actual GM, Rich Paul, wants to see traded. So, again, this is all hypothetical.
Right. No, very true. All right. So we're going to have a fun show on Wednesday. Nick Angstadt, host of Locked on Mavs and the Locked on NBA show on the network, is going to join us. We'll get ready for a Luka-less Mavericks team, but really talk a lot about the Western Conference and what's going on around the NBA. So that'll be
Jason
a fun
Kidd
show
as a coach.
And Jason Kidd, who Lakers fans are still quite interested in. So we'll talk about that on Wednesday's show. I want to remind everybody to subscribe to Locked on Lakers on YouTube. And thank everybody for making us your first